Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials Educational Podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with individual education plans, services under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, Section 504 services, English speakers of other languages, and interventions. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness to promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge. We all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. Edufaith, EDU, education, and faith, trusting or believing in one's ability. Edufaith would love for you to join our family, so subscribe at www.edufaithconsulting.com and make sure you subscribe to the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. I'm your host, Dr. Nakia. Thank you for joining me today. As always, sending you good vibes, love, peace, and happiness.
Get Essential, marching forward with MTSS, the multi-tiered system of support. Let's start with the Edufaith Inspirational story. This month's story is titled Mission Possible. As we march on, we want to remember that any mission is possible. In January 2026, a Georgia special education teacher, Wes Massey, embarked on an inspiring journey that not only transformed his students' experiences, but also showcased the true essence of inclusive leadership. Before too long, students with special needs were left out of overnight school trips due to worries about medical needs and logistics. Instead of accepting the status quo, Mr. Massey boldly asked, "Why not them?" Through thoughtful planning and teamwork, he arranged the school's very first overnight trip for 31 students with special needs. His collaboration with families and staff to ensure necessary accommodations, such as medication management and sensory supports, was crucial. The result? An unforgettable trip. Students who rarely had the chance to travel overnight dove into shared activities and fostered their independence, leaving an incredible sense of belonging. Families noticed their children returning with newfound confidence, while teachers celebrated the growth of social skills. This story marks a powerful shift in perspective. Inclusion means breaking down barriers, not compromising on expectations. As March approaches, let's hold on to this inspiring message that effective leadership often begins with one courageous question: what would it take? At Edufaith, we firmly believe that every learner deserves opportunities and experiences that affirm you belong here. Sometimes it just takes one determined educator to determine the notion of no is not the final answer. A huge shout out to Mr. Massey. We are thrilled to celebrate you on the Edufaith Essentials Podcast. You can find the link on the Edufaith Consulting News and Announcements page and on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. And remember, if you have a heartwarming story to share, please email me. We would love to spread the word of the wonderful, inspiring things that are happening in your community. And that is it for our Edufaith Inspirational story. Now let's shift to our dates to remember for the month of March. March is a very busy month, so let's dive in with all the wonderful observances. March is Brain Injury Awareness Month, the United States and expanding globally, Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in the United States, Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month in the United States, Epilepsy Awareness Month in Canada, Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month in the United States, Self-Injury Awareness Month in the United States and Canada. Autism Acceptance Week is March 30th through April 4th in the United Kingdom. Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month in the U.S., Endometriosis Awareness Month globally, National Kidney Month in the United States, Color Therapy Month in the United States, Red Cross Month in the United States and in Canada, National Reading Month in the United States, National Athletic Training Month in the United States, Women History Month. We want to celebrate our wonderful women and the wonderful accomplishments of women in the world. Youth Art Month in the United States, National Nutrition Month in the United States, and Music in Our Schools Month. As we look into those specific dates, March 1st is International Wheelchair Day globally. It's also Disability Day of Mourning in the United States. is Self-Injury Awareness Day globally, Self-Harm and Self-Injury Awareness Day in the United Kingdom, and March 1st through the 7th is School Social Work Week, where we celebrate our school social workers. So if you have a social worker in the school, make sure that you celebrate them March 1st through the 7th. March 2nd is Read Across America Day, and National School Breakfast Week starts March 2nd through the 6th. March 2nd is also International Social Emotional Learning Day. March 3rd is World Hearing Day Global. March 6th is Employee Appreciation Day and Maintenance Workers Appreciation Day. So make sure that you celebrate your maintenance workers in your schools and in your district. March 8th is International Women's Day. March 8th, Daylight Savings Time begins in the United States. And World Glaucoma Week starts March 8th through the 14th. March 10th is National Women's and Girls HIV/AIDS Awareness Day in the United States. March 12th is University Mental Health Day in the United Kingdom. March 14th is Pi Day. March 14th is also my wonderful, beautiful baby boy, Christian. His birthday is March 14th. I love you, Christian, and happy birthday. And it's also a double dose. My dad's birthday is also March 14th. So happy birthday, Daddy Hagman Simmons. Love you. Christian Cotton, love you. Happy birthday on March 14th. March 16th kicks off Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is March 16th through the 22nd. It's also Disabled Access Day in the United Kingdom. March 17th, for the luck of the Irish, is St. Patrick's Day. March 18th is National Trisomy Awareness Day in the United States. March 19th is the end of Ramadan. March 21st is World Down Syndrome Day. March 24th is World Tuberculosis Day. March 25th is National Cerebral Palsy Awareness Day in the United States. March 26th is Purple Day for Epilepsy globally. Wear your purple. March 30th is World Bipolar Awareness Day globally. And it kicks off Autism Acceptance Week, which starts March 30th through April 4th in the United Kingdom. And that is it for our dates to remember for the month of March. We have quite a few days to look at and observe. We remember Inclusion Matters with Women's History Month, St. Patrick's Day, birthdays. We want to just make sure that we celebrate March. And I hope you all have a wonderful March as we get ready to look for spring. Now it's time for Essential News. We will start our Essential News off with a wonderful announcement. I am pleased to announce that I am CEC bound. That's right. I will be presenting, Dr. Nakia Edufaith will be presenting at the Council for Exceptional Children's Conference this March. This is a national conference that promotes positivity and inclusion for parents, leaders, teachers, educators, social workers, any person who works with students with special needs. This is a national conference where we highlight the positivity and share our knowledge and resources with everyone who really wants to foster inclusion and support special needs. And this year, I will be co-presenting Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders and Essential Tips for Section 504 Coordinators and 2 collaborative sessions. The first session, I'll be co-presenting Strategic Leadership and Disability Compliance, Making Sense of Reading Policy. I will present on March 11th with 2 other wonderful co-presenters. Then I am honored to be a part of the Yes, I Can Committee. This is a national committee where we honor teens and young adults with disabilities who have overcome obstacles and gone on to do great things in spite of. I'm a part of the Yes, I Can Committee, and on March 13th, I'll be presenting with the Yes, I Can Committee, and we will be honoring exceptional lives and exceptional stories for those wonderful individuals. We will highlight students, young adults, their families, and it's just a wonderful award ceremony where we are just happy to watch our young adults overcome obstacles and do great things. During these sessions, I'll share practical strategies in the strategic leadership session, and then exceptional lives and exceptional stories. I will moderate some and handshake and hug and just get to hear the wonderful stories of wonderful individuals with disabilities as we celebrate them at the National CEC Conference. It's just my 3rd year presenting at the conference, and I'm always thankful for the opportunity to contribute on a national discussion about IDEA, Section 504, and inclusive excellence. And I take pride in advancing Edufaith, the mission, on a national platform, and then sharing my knowledge with others, and then celebrating others as well. So that's one of our essential news stories. Wish me luck, and I will definitely give you a highlight when I return on the April episode of how wonderful it was and how it went. And I may even share some pictures. All right, now let's dive into our national news stories for Essential News. The first story is GAO report finds 90% of civil rights complaints dismissed. On February 2nd, 2026, a report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO, highlighted serious problems within the Office of Civil Rights, OCR, of the U.S. Department of Education. Between March and September 2025, OCR reviewed 9,000 discrimination complaints and resolved more than 7,000. However, it's concerning that around 90% of the complaints were dismissed without a thorough investigation. This included cases involving students with disabilities. The GAO's reports also noted that 247 OCR staff members were placed on paid leave starting March 21st, 2025, preventing them from conducting any investigative work for nearly 9 months. This resulted in a financial cost to taxpayers estimated at between $28.5 million and $38 million. Disability advocates are worried that fewer investigations will leave families of students unprotected under specific special education laws with less support and oversight. This could lead schools to not follow the rules meant to protect students with disabilities. Story 2. Triaging Civil Rights, IDEA Protections at Risk. This story is dated February 12, 2026, and on February 12, 2026, the American Bar Association's Disability Rights section released a report highlighting the problems at the Department of Education. They warned that staff cuts and instability are making it difficult for the Office of Civil Rights to protect the rights of people with disabilities. During this time, employees face delays in accessing their systems, slowing the investigation of complaints. Celine Amazon from the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, COPA, noted that families didn't receive updates on their complaints. Although job cuts were reportedly reversed in January, uncertainty remains how many investigators will return and whether cuts could occur. Advocates fear that weakened enforcement can harm the implementation of disability laws in schools nationwide. Seems like story 1 and story 2 kind of go hand in hand, and this is all about Office of Civil Rights. Very interesting. Story 3, OCR secures 31 higher education resolution agreements. February 19, 2026, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights announced that 31 colleges and universities agreed to end their partnership with the PhD project after it was found to limit participation based on race, violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Of the 45 institutions investigated, 31 either ceased their relationship or formalized agreements to do so. They also committed to reviewing their partnership with other organizations to ensure compliance of federal civil rights laws, highlighting the office's broader role in enforcing civil rights protections. Story 4, how people with disabilities could bear the burden of Medicaid cuts. And this came from PBS NewsHour. This story was part of PBS NewsHour's Disability Reframed series and examines how proposed federal Medicaid funding could significantly impact people with disabilities, especially home and community-based care providers. This piece highlights how cuts in federal spending for Medicaid and CHIP may affect after-day programs and services for families and adults with disabilities who rely on daily care and inclusion. The report features voices from caregivers, participants, and political analysts discussing the potential consequences of long-term funding and reductions. And story 5 is dated February 2026, and this is from Education Week. Education Week reported that Congress approved the federal education budget for the year totaling about $79 billion. This budget prevents cuts to school funding and maintains support for essential programs for low-income students and students with disabilities. Schools can confidently prepare for the upcoming year without worrying about sudden funding cuts, though they still may face challenges from rising costs and ongoing debates over how to manage education services for students with disabilities. And that story once again came from Education Week. As we close out Essential News, we just want to reflect on the February and the January stories. And that is it for our Essential News for the month of January and February. These story links will be on the Edufaith Essentials News and Announcements page. And that is it for our Essential News. Now it's time for Essential Knowledge. For Essential Knowledge, we are getting essential and we're marching forward with the multi-tiered system of support. What I want to do today is provide an overview, the goals and purpose, the tiers, the core principles, strategies, intervention plans, and then I want to provide some tips for parents, educators, and leaders regarding the multi-tiered system of support. A multi-tiered system of supports is a proactive and preventative framework that integrates data and instruction to maximize student success from a strengths-based perspective. MTSS offers a framework for educators to engage in data-based decision-making related to program improvement, high-quality instruction, and intervention. It also promotes student engagement to ensure positive outcomes for districts, schools, teachers, and students. The MTSS framework is comprised of 4 essential components: screening, progress monitoring, multi-level prevention system, and data-based decision-making. Depending on state laws, MTS data may also support identification of students with learning disabilities or other disabilities in the process, including special education and Section 504. Multi-tier system of support, MTSS, helps educators address academic, social, emotional, and behavior needs by integrating response to intervention, RTI, and PBIS frameworks, positive behavior intervention supports. Remember, I discussed those in the January and February episode. It promotes whole child education through data-driven decision-making, enhances instruction, and strengthens positive behavior supports. This proactive approach facilitates early identification of challenges and fosters school-wide collaboration, empowering staff to contribute to student success. When we think about the goals of MTSS and how it supports our learners, the goal is to provide equitable support for all students, aiding teachers in tracking needs and conducting interventions based on whole child data. This proactive, data-driven framework helps identify challenges early and enhances student mental health. Research also shows that students in MTSS schools perform better academically and emotionally. Proper implementation fosters a positive school culture, ensuring consistent support for every student regardless of their background. One of my other mantras I've discussed this whole year is positive school culture and doing it for the culture. MTSS supports that, and I just wanted to highlight that. And we discussed school culture in the October podcast. When we think about MTSS is comprised of something called tiers. And there are 4 tiers in the MTSS process. The first tier is prevention and foundation. And this is your core instruction that you provide to all students universally. The first tier is school-wide and universal. It's your prevention and foundation level. The goal is to provide high-quality, inclusive instruction where 80 or 90% of students can succeed without additional intervention. And that is this tier here on the visual, if you're looking at the visual of the video podcast. For instance, you want to make sure that you have that culture, routine, procedures, and things that are clear, because those things will help support that tier 1 instruction. The next tier, if we go up the framework here, is early intervention. The goal is to provide supplemental small group support to catch students, identify those students, and catch those students who may be falling behind or struggling socially before that gap widens. And those are your tier 2 students. You target those students. You might pull them for small group as an educator, and then you work with those students to close those gaps in the instructional environment. It provides just that holistic support to meet students where they are on a smaller group level. Level 3, that's where we get into the intensive and individual supports. The tiers started off with 3 tiers, and as time went on, it has become 4 tiers for instruction in MTSS. The third tier is your removal of barriers. This might be your students who are Section 504 and receive accommodations. These are your students that require that more intensive instruction. And the goal is to provide some individualized accommodations that remove specific barriers to a student's participation. For instance, a student who may have a Section 504 plan might be tier 3. That student that needs that individualized instruction one-on-one where they can practice and refine their skills. That's for your level 3 students. Level 4 is not on the visual here, but the 4th level is your specially designed instruction. And this might be your students who have an individual education plan. And the goal for tier 4 students is to deliver intensive, specialized instruction, which is what an IEP is, with interventions tailored to a student's unique learning need, and learning success. 4 tiers in the multi-tier system of support. So to recap that, we got the school-wide universal, which is your 80% and 90% of your students. Then you have your tier 2, your small group, working with small group students for reteaching and closing those gaps. Tier 3, we're removing those barriers. Maybe your students with Section 504 or those students who just require that individualized instruction and supports. And then tier 4, you're looking at your specialized instruction, intensive instruction to support students with accommodations and interventions to support them in the class socially, emotionally, or academically. And that's an explanation of the MTSS and the tiers. The ultimate goal of MTSS is fluidity. We want to provide enough supports to move students down the tiers, moving a student from tier 3 to eventually to tier 2 to help them gain confidence, learn skills, gain independence. And when we think about tiers 1 through 4, we want to make sure that we meet learners where they are and close those gaps no matter where that student falls within the tiers of MTSS. Great practices, great teaching, and those are the things that you have to do. And it's also making sure that you implement MTSS with fidelity. So providing those tier supports consistently and collecting data on them. As we look into the 6 core principles guiding response to intervention and MTSS academically, we want to make sure that we have that regular data collection on student performance. We want to make sure that we are identifying those students at risk in a timely manner. We don't want to delay services. We want to intervene early and meet students where they are. We want to make sure that we have those proactive intervention strategies for students in pre-K to 3rd grade, because those are those impressional years where students are learning to read, developing literacy, learning number sense. So these are those foundation years. So you really want to make sure that you are looking at being proactive in those early grades so students are learning to read, and then as they grow, they read to learn. We want to make sure that we have that foundation solid. You want to make sure that you have that multi-tiered delivery service model with those 4 tiers, and that you're implementing them with fidelity consistently and providing consistent interventions where you can collect data for that student. You want to make sure that you're using research-based, scientifically validated instruction and interventions. If you go and Google parents, students, and leaders, research-based interventions, the internet will provide you with a plethora of interventions for any need a student may have. So use the internet, use your resources, and you can find research-based interventions. And for my parents, if your child is on the multi-tier system of support, you can also support your child with implementing those interventions in the home. As leaders, you're going to help support your teachers and provide resources for your teachers to implement the interventions. And then teachers, you're going to implement those interventions to support students and meet them where they are. And that's just best teaching practices. In the model, there's continuous progress monitoring with evaluations and modification of intervention. For instance, you're going to implement the intervention, you're going to collect data, you're going to implement it with fidelity, and then you're going to assess that student, see where the student is, if the gaps are closing, or if you need to reteach or do something different. It's all about putting the puzzle pieces together to meet learners where they are and find out which way they learn so you can tap into that. When you think about the 4 key elements, you have screening, which is a universal screener. We have different tests in schools where we screen students and find out what level they're on. So your school will do a screener for your child. A teacher, you will do a screener for your students based on whatever curriculum or product that your school has purchased. From there, you review that data. You use multiple measures of data, so not just the test, but maybe even some classroom samples of work. And then from there, you screen what that student is. You develop a plan of action, and then you implement the interventions that that student needs based on that data, and then you monitor that student's progress. You may monitor progress daily, weekly. There are different intervention systems that are set in place that help support intervention tracking. And then you want to make sure that you have that multi-level prevention system. So once the student meets tier 2, how are we going to intervene and prevent them from going to tier 3? How are we going to intervene and prevent them from going to tier 4? Every learner is different, but this is why we have these systems in place, and using that data and data-driven decision-making to determine if we need to bump up our interventions, if we need to pull back our interventions, if these interventions are unsuccessful. Maybe the student needs an IEP and specialized instruction. Maybe the student needs a Section 504. It's not a cure, but it's a way of just identifying what students need and seeing how we can develop a plan of action to support that learner and implement everything, including the interventions, the plans with fidelity. I went through the core principles. I've explained the tiers. Now we're going to get into the strategies and intervention plans. The multi-tier system of support is a framework designed to provide varying levels of support to students based on their individual needs. Within this system, students who fall into the tiers 2 or 3 are provided with personalized intervention plans. This is your plan of action. I mentioned this just a few minutes ago. The primary purpose of the plan is to address and support the specific challenges that students face in their learning journey. We've heard of the individual education plan. A student might require that. A student may require a Section 504 plan. But before they get into one of those plans, they may have an intervention plan, which is aligned with the multi-tiered system of support. The key components of an intervention plan includes goals. So setting goals, remember I talked about those universal screeners and that data that you collect to see where that student is. Based on that data, you're going to develop a goal. Teachers will set a goal, a clear, attainable goal tailored to that student's unique needs based on that data and those screeners. From there, they're going to regularly assess and track the student's progress to ensure they're on the right path of achieving those goals. This can be behavior or academically. It's usually a multi-tiered system of approach team at a school. And the team meets, and it's a team of teachers, parents are involved, maybe administrators, some school psychologists. It depends on the school infrastructure. But it's not only a teacher strategy. MTSS is a whole group committee where parents, leaders, teachers, and the school team all work together to identify and work as a team collaboratively as a village to support the student. So let's get back to interventions and what interventions actually mean. Interventions mean implementing targeted strategies such as innovative teaching methods and specialized support tools to help the students succeed. This is something that teachers will do in the classroom, but parents, you can help support teachers at home and support your child at home with the process of helping closing those gaps. The overall intervention plan aims to provide structured and effective support to enhance student learning outcomes. And once again, I really want to reiterate that there is an MTSS team, a multi-tiered system of support team of teachers, parents, and other school staff that help support in the implementation of MTSS. I really wanted to make sure that I pointed out that it's not just a teacher thing, it's a village thing, a collaborative school village with parent involvement initiative. All right. Intervention plans look different. Every school district will have an intervention plan for a student who is on MTSS, looking at target tier 2 or tier 3. And then, of course, you have your Section 504 and IEPs. Oh, and I forgot, English language learner plans. When you think about these different plans, they often address reading, math, behavior. So whatever the deficit is that's going on with the student, where they're not meeting that core instruction, that's where the intervention plan will come in. And like I said, there'll be goals, there'll be interventions, there'll be data markers where they're tracking the data, and then the team will come together periodically to assess the data, to make decisions based on the data, and determine the next plan of action for the student. When we're thinking about intervention plans, schools, teams, teachers, my leaders, we want to make sure that we create simple plans for the student. We address the student need. We identify some strategies and interventions. We get our parents involved. We may provide some type of accommodations. We monitor and discuss how it's going to be progress monitored and how frequently, and that it's implemented with fidelity. Because if you're not implementing with fidelity, then your data is not going to be concrete. And then you learn how to track those accommodations. And some teachers and leaders and teams, they use graphs. They have different software that provides tracking of data. So if you're a parent and you're part of the MTSS team, ask about the data collection and be a part of the process. And teachers and leaders make sure, and my MTSS teams make sure that you communicate with parents how often and how frequently you're collecting data, and make sure that that parent is a part of the process. Now we want to shift into intervention plans, but I talked about the academics. So let's discuss positive intervention support. I'm not going to go into it a whole lot because we talked about the last 2 episodes of MTSS and positive behavior support. But when we're looking at MTSS and how behavior support helps students, As far as positive behavior interventions, we're just looking at it's an integral part, because if behavior is impeding or behavior is heightened, the student is not learning, others are not learning. So you want to make sure that you provide that support behaviorally along with academics to look at the whole child. I discussed a lot of interventions and strategies in the last 2 episodes. Dr. Middleton talked about this too. When we think about MTSS and PBIS, we want to make sure that we're teaching concepts of behaviors and skills. We're arranging our environments. We're modeling behaviors. We're doing pro-social, restorative justice, and skills and behavior. And then we're implementing those evidence-based behavioral practices with fidelity and accountability. So the same thing that you're doing with academics, you're going to do with behavior to support a student. When you look at MTSS and PBIS, they're both a part of the MTSS process where you're doing that tiered evidence-based interventions, using data to solve problems and assess data, and then you're doing that ongoing assessment of progress monitoring. I've been on teams where we've done PBIS or an intervention plan, a behavior intervention plan, and with the behavior intervention plan, which I discussed in the January episode, it's the same strategy: identifying the behavior, looking at the data, establishing some goals, implementing those interventions, and then coming back and progress monitoring those interventions to see if those interventions are really helping that student behaviorally in the classroom so they can learn. Well, that's pretty much it for intervention plans. So I just wanted to highlight the intervention plan as we shift forward. And now let's go ahead and look into some tips for parents, educators, and leaders regarding the multi-tiered system of support. So the first tip, and I broke this down a little differently this time. The first tip is start with data, but humanize it. The tip: MTSS works when decisions are data informed, not emotionally driven or assumption based. Parents, my tip for you: ask what data we are using to determine support. I said that earlier. Make sure when you're part of the MTSS process, don't feel intimidated and always ask questions. So ask whatever question you want to ask about the process. But one thing I do want to make sure that you ask is ask about the data that you're using. Request examples of the progress monitoring data. Request updates based on how frequently the team they're looking at the data. Usually fidelity means 4 to 6 weeks. Every MTSS team collects data differently. Based on their progress monitoring, ask for those samples of data so you can keep track of what's going on with your child, and you can help reinforce those skills at home. For my educators, you want to use screenings plus classroom performance data before moving to tier 2. For my leaders, you want to build a system where data meetings are structured, recurring, and solution-oriented. So you want to have that common MTSS system and those meetings a common part of your school culture and practice, where teachers know on the third Thursday or the second Wednesday or the morning of this day, we're going to have these structured meetings in our schools. And teachers are going to use this data and time to discuss students and meet students where they are and discuss the MTSS process. All right, so the first tip, once again, was start with data, but humanize it because it's a data-driven initiative. The next thing is intervene early. Don't wait for failure. The top tip I want to leave is tier 1 support must be strong before escalating to tier 2 or tier 3. So you want to make sure that you have those strong systems in place and that 80 or 90% of your students are meeting those needs. If 80 or 90% of the students are not meeting those supports, maybe teachers, you need to look at your classroom and look at your reteaching and see what's going on with your curriculum and the delivery and kind of problem solve. Look at exit tickets and look at your assessment data. For parents, the tip is if your child is struggling, ask what tier 1 supports have already been tried. Parents, you have a right to be a part of the process. So ask what the teacher is doing for tier 1 for all students. And then they can explain what they're seeing differently for your child. For my educators, you want to document classroom interventions with fidelity at tier 1 before you refer a student for MTSS services. And for my leaders, you want to ensure teachers are trained in differentiated instruction. Differentiated instruction is really important because if you're going to teach the various tiers, you have to be able to differentiate your instruction by content, process, and assessment when looking at students. I think I did a podcast on that, on differentiated instruction. If not, I will. When I think about MTSS prevention, it's not a waiting room for special education. It's meeting students where they are and seeing how you can intervene to close the gaps. So we want to intervene early and don't wait for failure. So the first tip is start with data, but humanize it. And then the second tip is intervene early. The next tip number 3, is clarify the difference between MTSS, 504, and IDEA. Now, I know for this podcast, I discuss IDEA and 504 a lot, and that's why I felt like it was time for me to discuss MTSS. MTSS is a framework. It's not a disability determination. Once again, it's meant to meet students where they are, the whole child, and see how we can close gaps before they require those services. There's nothing wrong with those services, but a lot of times, if there's great teaching involved, some of those gaps will close with great teaching, great progress monitoring, and great MTSS strategies. Now, sometimes Tier 1, Tier 2 may not be enough. A student may require that individualized or targeted instruction, individualized Tier 3 and Tier 4, and that's okay. But you want to make sure that you've implemented what you're doing with fidelity before we label a child with a disability. When we think about the frameworks, we want to look at the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Section 504. MTSS should support access, but not delay it. That's the other thing, too. We don't want to use MTSS if a parent says they want their child tested for special education. Or Section 504. MTSS should not be used as a tool to delay the process, but used in collaboration with to collect data as you work through the process. So I want to make sure that my educators and leaders understand that, because I've seen that too. A parent said they want their child tested, and the school might say we have to put them through MTSS first. A parent has a right to request that their child is tested, and your school also has a right to look and collect data to MTSS. They both can happen simultaneously, and the data that you're using from MTSS can be used to support placement in special education or Section 504 if that student qualifies. If that student does not qualify, then that student may just continue to get those MTSS supports. But we never want to use MTSS as a process to delay services, especially if a parent is requesting it. It should support access, not delay it. And so that's my third tip, is clarifying the difference between MTSS, 504, and IDEA. The last tip I'm going to leave today is build collaborative teams, not silos. I've been saying this, it takes a village, it takes a village. MTSS thrives when communication is consistent and solutions are shared. We have to work together. Parents, teachers, leaders, we have to work together for the betterment of the student, of the child, to support the child. We have to be child-centered, student first, student-centered. So parents request participation in problem-solving meetings. Ask to be a part of the MTS process. Ask any questions. Like I said, don't feel intimidated. This is your child. So you want to know what the school is doing, and you want to make sure that you understand the process and that the communication is clear, because you want to share what you're doing at home and make sure that it aligns with the schools. And we have to have that communication to see, so we can make sure that students thrive. For my educators, you want to bring your strengths to the table, not just deficits. So you want to bring your strengths and the student's strengths. So the student may not be good in these things, but also always highlight what the student is strong at. And then highlight your strengths as well as how you're going to tap into that student's strengths and deficits and support that child holistically. You just want to have that positive interaction and communicate with the parents. You want to be transparent, but you also want to highlight strengths as well as weaknesses. It's always great to start with a positive. And then leaders, you want to create a culture, that word culture, of psychological safety, so teams can problem solve honestly. You want to have it where it's open and that everyone is having that dialogue and no one is afraid to talk about what's needed for that child. A podcast line, MTSS is strongest when families, teachers, and leaders move in alignment. I'm going to recap those 4 tips for parents, educators, and leaders one more time. So start with data and humanize it. Intervene early. Don't wait for failure. Clarify the difference between MTSS, 504, and IDEA, and don't use MTSS as a delaying mechanism if a parent requests an evaluation under special education or Section 504. Move forward with that evaluation and use MTSS, and do both of them at the same time, simultaneously, collecting the data from MTSS to help with the decision for eligibility for additional services. And then the final strategy, once again, is Build collaborative teams, not silos, because it takes a village. And that is it about MTSS. That wraps up our conversation about MTSS. I hope that it gave you a clear picture of the process and why it's really important to support the whole child. Throughout all of my books, I discuss the MTSS process. It is highlighted in Essential Tips for Parents, Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, Essential Tips for Educators, and I discuss it a little bit in Essential Tips for Section 504. Grab a copy of the books, get Essential. And now we're going to shift to our words of wisdom. And our word of wisdom as we think about MTSS in March and how we're looking at supporting all learners and inclusion for all. I want to leave you with this quote. We never know which lives we influence or when or why. And that comes from Stephen King, author Stephen King. And that word of wisdom is really for everyone. Parents, you never know how you influence your child's life. Teachers, you never know your influence or the when or why. And leaders, same to you. As we look at ways to tap in and support all learners and meet them where they are, we want to make sure that we influence their lives and meet all learners where they are as we move forward and get Essential with MTSS in March.
I want to encourage you to get Essential and explore resources that truly support your journey in education, parenthood, and leadership. I've written a variety of books specifically designed for leaders, educators, parents, and Section 504 coordinators. Each one created to inspire action, build capacity, and strengthen impact. All of my books are available on Amazon and the Edufaith Consulting website. Be sure to follow me on Amazon under Dr. Nakia Simmons Cotton to stay updated on new releases and empowering content created just for you. We have Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, Essential Tips for Educators, Essential Tips for Section 504 coordinators, and Essential Tips for Parents. Now it's time to share. I enjoy connecting with listeners, offering advice, and answering questions and sharing inspirational stories. I want to use this platform to share and care. Essential advice is your turn to ask for advice or share good news. The letters will remain anonymous and the stories will be featured on the podcast. Sharing is caring. Please email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH, the number 4ALL@gmail.com. All listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines in the best interest of children. Edufaith Essentials does not assume responsibility or is legally liable for anyone's actions based on the information in this podcast. Before I go, I want to invite you to subscribe to www.edufaithconsulting.com to stay connected and informed. When you subscribe, you'll receive a monthly newsletter packed with fresh resources, leadership tips, and an insightful blog to support your growth as an educator, leader, or parent. www.edufaithconsulting.com. Scroll down, enter your email address, and click subscribe. Don't forget to check out and subscribe to the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, where you'll find practical videos, interviews, and essential strategies designed to empower your work and purpose. Let's grow together, stay connected, and stay equipped. Get Essential. At Edufaith Educational Services, we are committed to equipping families, educators, and leaders with tools, training, and support they need to thrive in today's educational landscape. In addition to our podcast, we provide a wide variety of educational services designed to address the needs of parents, support with disability services, meeting advocacy, service explanations, educators, guidance, coaching, professional development, and leaders, training, professional coaching, leadership coaching, and support with diverse learners and programs. We also specialize in college and accommodation advocacy, including SAT and ACT accommodation support, college and career readiness coaching, and parent education training for schools, organizations, and community groups. Our expertise extends to program development and review, including Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504, and inclusive practice frameworks. We offer customized professional development for schools, districts, nonprofits, and businesses focused on supporting diverse learners and inclusive education. Edufaith is also proud to offer trainings based on our impactful Essential Tips book series, including Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, Essential Tips for Section 504 coordinators, and Essential Tips for parents and educators. These sessions provide practical strategies, compliance guidance, and leadership insight grounded in real work experience and align with current educational policies. Go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to see what Edufaith can do to support you. Don't forget to follow Edufaith on social media to stay connected, inspired, and informed. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, TikTok, and other social media platforms for daily tips, encouragement, upcoming events, and behind-the-scenes updates. Whether you're a parent, educator, or leader, our social media platforms offer valuable content, community engagement, and practical strategies to support your journey. Stay in the know and be a part of the movement. Follow Edufaith today. As we close out, I want to thank you for listening to today's episode and thank you for staying connected to the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Don't miss a moment to listen to the Edufaith Essentials podcast on your favorite platforms, including Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all other podcast platforms, including Buzzsprout. All links to the podcast and information is easily accessible on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. Tune in, subscribe, and join us as we inspire and equip you every step of the way. Dr. Nakia here signing off, reminding you to be the light, be the change, love someone. Let's restore faith in education one student at a time, and let's get essential.